Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of a 6-part video training sessions on the local evaluations for Iowa 21st century programs. Part 2, we're going to be looking at sections 1 and 2 of the local evaluation form. And then there will be the last 4 videos will finish up the local evaluation form and then give you some needed important information in the last video. Let's take a look at the form and get started. Here's the form we have. First thing I want to point out in this form, notice that the dates all end in XX. That's because this is a generic form. When each year as you do your local evaluation with the form, it will have the actual dates that you're evaluating. The second part of that also is it says constantly through here cohorts 1 through 5. That's not the actual cohorts. There will always be 5 cohorts that are being evaluated, but they might be 2 through 6. They won't really be. They'll be 9 through 13, whatever. But that'll all be fixed in that deal there. Now if we look at this first page, we'll notice that the local evaluation form has 8 required sections. I'd point out the word required. It's not really a choice to decide to do one or not. I mean, I guess it is a choice, but as we pointed out in the previous videos, that can have some consequences you might not like. Now, just like when you give a student a paper, the first thing you should do is put your name on the paper. And the way you do that in this local evaluation form is we simply highlight grantee name and we put the name of our grantee, whether it's a school district or another entity. Then the second thing we need to do is make sure we save this so that we always have the original form. Of course, you can always download it again. But when you send it in, we don't need every evaluation to have the same file name. So the way we do that, we go File, Save As. You can save it wherever you're going to save it. I'm going to save it in a folder I have. It doesn't matter. And we're simply going to change the last part of this, local evaluation form, Bedrock CSD. Now some folks actually put the title and save it as the name of their program. That really doesn't help us because we're evaluating all the state, so it's difficult for us to know, well, what was the name of that one? The Warriors? Which school was that? So we would appreciate if you would use the actual name of the grantee and not the name of the program itself that you've chosen. We want to notice some things here on this first page. Notice that you're only going to submit one evaluation that encompasses all the centers funded by the grantee. If you don't do that, someone has to spend time, and time is money, to combine those into one evaluation. So we'll require that each grantee submit one evaluation for all the ones. The data should include the fall and spring of a school year and the summer right before that school year. So the summer and the fall will be the same year, and the spring, of course, will be the next year since schools are split that way. As I pointed out, there are 8 required sections, and during this training we're going to go through each one of these and talk about them in pretty much detail. You'll see that for each one of these required sections, there's also a list of required elements for that section, so there shouldn't be any confusion about what goes in there. I will point out there's some stuff in red, and as it says here, if you see something in red, that's either instructions or a clarification for you. We've tried not to have a separate document that talks about instructions, because then you got to go back and forth. So we've tried to include all that in one. So let's move on to the actual first section, section 1. The general information. As I promised, there is a required elements table for this. And this one consists of simply 2 tables, basic information, center information. There's even a place for you to keep track for yourself of whether it's complete or not. The basic information table is pretty simple. Whatever date you're going to submit the form, by November 30th is the deadline, but you can certainly submit it before then. The grantee name, we know this one is the Bedrock CSD. The program director, of course, is Fred Flintstone. Wait a minute. Fred's not too bright. Let's make Wilma the program director. And put in the email, Wilma at blah blah blah. I don't need to fill that out. And the phone numbers. The reason we need the email and phone numbers for both the program director and the evaluator, we may have some follow-up questions or that we need or more data, and that's how we know who to contact. So be sure to include those things. Then there's a little table if you need to tell us something, like we actually have two directors and this one's that and that one, or I'm the principal of the school and the director, so anything you feel would be helpful for us to know, you should put in there. The center information table is pretty simple. There are 5 cohorts. Remember, these won't be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll be whatever that year's cohorts are. Notice the red, clarification. If you don't have a cohort in one of these, just leave it blank. And for each cohort that you have, you enter the names of the centers separated by commas, like Bedrock Elementary School. It's helpful for us to know, to have you tell us whether it's an elementary, middle school, high school, secondary, what it is, because we don't know your school district like you do. So when you just give us the names of the schools, we don't know what level those are. And so we have Bedrock Elementary, and then they did one more. They did one for their middle school, and that's all Bedrock did. So we leave these others blank. That's just the way it is. So we're ready to go to section 2. We've got our basic information entered. Now we know who it is, who we can contact, which schools the centers are at, or locations. Doesn't necessarily have to be a school. So let's go to section 2, which is our introduction executive summary. This may be, as far as an evaluation, may be one of the most important parts of this. It's not data that we specifically need for the Federal Department of Education, as we pointed out in previous video, but it is something very helpful for you. It gives you time to reflect and talk about your program. Notice the required elements. You want to talk about your program of implementation. You want to describe your program, and then you want to brag on your program. That's what you need to do on this. So talk about, in your program implementation, this is all a narrative process. How did you come up with you needed an after-school program? Who are the key people involved? Of course, you have a program director. Is the principal really involved, or are they sending them over to a Boys and Girls Club, and it's really the Boys and Girls Club people that are the key people? This is a chance for you to, although there's a whole section on partners, you might want to talk about, well, we have this one partner that's just fantastic, da-da-da-da-da. And how did you develop your objectives? And we're going to talk a lot about objectives when we get to the local objectives section, and to make sure that they're measurable, they're SMART. We'll talk about SMART later. If there's one thing program directors know, it's they know the description of their program. What days do you meet? Hours? Do you meet 5 days a week, 6 days a week, whatever? Of course, if you have a summer program, you're going to talk about your summer program. How many days does it meet? Give us a list of activities. It does not have to be exhaustive, but you certainly want to talk about the activities you do. Perhaps your program is club-based, so you may have a chess club, you may have a STEM club, you may have a reading club, other clubs. Do you go on field trips? Where would those go? How do the partners fit in on that? Talk about your centers. Why are those schools your location? This is especially important if you have a center and it's bringing in students from other schools. You need to talk about that in here, because we don't understand that unless you tell us. Are there attendance requirements to come to the program? Do you drop them after a certain amount of time? This is also a time you can talk about whether it's not actually listed here as a required element, but you might want to talk about if you charge for the program or not. You might want to talk about meals, even though that's in your, that's later in a survey, but you still might want to talk about it here. And last, governance. How do you decide what to do with this program? Is it simply a superintendent, principal, school board directed, or do you have a separate governance board of, stakeholders, parents, partners, even students on it? And make sure in your program highlights that you brag on your program. What is really special about your program? We know there's one program that has almost 100% attendance. Almost every student in the school goes. That's a bragging point. You might want to talk about some of your kids would never have seen certain things if not for the field trips. Of course, you should brag about any student achievement positive things that are happening. That's a real big thing. So these are the required elements that you're going to put in your introduction executive summary. Normally, you would do this last. You do the whole thing, and then you would look at all the following sections and decide what to put in here. I would probably write this up as best I could and then tweak it later as your local evaluator helps you with that, and you help them. And if there's a spot in this orange box, you simply type or copy and paste your summary here. It's up to you if you copy and paste. I like to copy and paste, because then I have a separate document with just that on it, and then I bring everything in here at the end. So for this video, we've talked about two things. We've talked about the general information section and the introduction executive summary section. And make sure you put your name on your paper, and make sure you fill out save as so we know whose it is. That's all we have for this video. In the next video, we're going to talk about demographic data. The whole video is going to be on that. Sometimes there's some confusion on that. We want to try to clear any of that up. So, if you have any questions about anything with your local evaluation, you can certainly contact one of these three people. We will get back with you and help you any way we can. Thank you for listening. It's been a joy. Goodbye.